started tonight. Greg's just going to pop in here with a couple of the updates about Sono games and stuff, just so it pops into the recording here and everybody else can access as well.
So hey everybody in person, online, also on the recording as well. Just a couple updates on Sono games. So firstly, for those of you who were there on Saturday, I apologize for the last minute change in room booking. We were supposed to be in room 504. We got kicked out for reasons that aren't our fault, and we're not exactly sure why we got kicked out. We had that room booked for a while. The second thing, I've gotten a lot of questions, and I know we've put out some information about accessing the resources and stuff. Originally, we were going to use Google Classroom. We've kind of run into a bit of a technical snag with it. So what we're going to do moving forward is, for all of you who are doing SimWars, you guys are familiar with the emsoc.ie website. And I think for SimWars, you guys have the recordings and the lectures and stuff. So if you guys go onto that website now and go under programs, there should be a Sono Games tab now, and we're going to put all the pre-reading material, the lectures and the quizzes and stuff up on there instead of the Google Classroom. This will work better for you guys because it's just one central place for both. You don't have to worry about Google Classrooms, and it works better for us because we don't have to deal with all the access issues and stuff that we've been trying to troubleshoot. So with that being said, I'll just hand it back to Colleen, and thank you guys very much for your patience and with us trying to figure this all out. So thank you.
Alrighty, so real quick to start off, just before we get into it, we just have some quick, close. I don't know if you can see, but we're doing housekeeping first, but we'll loop back in a couple minutes. Alright, so first things first, if any of your friends and stuff are asking, SimWars signups are closed. We close signups directly following the third week practical, because after that point, as you guys know, all of our knowledge kind of builds on the previous weeks. And to have someone jump in halfway through the semester that hasn't done all of the work in the learning so far is super unfair to the people that have been here and have done the learning, especially as we go forward over the next couple weeks, because we're going to be doing more scenario heavy stuff and you're going to be depending more and more on your team members. So we want everyone to have come from the same level of learning there. So we sent out an email today just to the people that tried to sign up this week that hadn't been here before. So if you have any friends, please extend our apologies that they can't join. Tell them they're more than welcome to still come to and or view the lectures, and to come back next year from the start, and we'll get them in to everything. That's the big one. The other thing is, if people that wanted to be involved in SimWars and can't for one reason or another, we're always looking for practice patients, especially when it comes to the second semester. So if that is you and or anybody else that you know, just let them know to reach out to us. And also, if I accidentally popped your name on the email list for some reason and you have been here, just shoot us an email right back, and we'll get that taken care of. Okay, great. So, as you guys know, we're kind of working our way through the ABCs. We're doing airway and breathing was first week, circulation was last week, and this week we're on to D&E, which is disability and exposure. This is kind of our last week going through the ABCDE stuff, because then from here on out we're going to switch to a little bit more of a team management focused and emergency focused training. Okay, so here we go. So, Blaze, did you want to say anything here?
No.
Okay. Cool. You're
the way you said people, if you have friends,
okay. So no, it just says your name in the speaker notes here. So I thought you put that there.
That's from years ago.
Dope. Cool. Okay, here we go then. So, as always, we're going to start with our basics, and then we're going to move on to talking about both disabilities and why it's important to expose your patients. Here are our learning outcomes. I'm not going to read you every word that's on this slide because you are adults in med school and you can read it yourself. But basically, this is a good reference if you're trying to go back through and review at any stage. This will give you kind of an outline of the important takeaway points. Great, so we're starting with the basics. First of which, airway. There we go. Next. Next. And now. And beautiful. So disability and exposure are pretty broad terms. They cover a lot. Other airway breathing circulation is pretty system specific and has a pretty narrow range of things that it can be. As we move forward, we're gonna have a lot more and more systemic things that are gonna be coming in. So for disability, that could be anything head to toe that qualifies as either an injury from trauma or a physiological injury. That's something more internal that maybe you can't see right away, but you pick up on a later exam. And exposure is pretty straightforward. Expose your patients, especially when you're doing a trauma survey. There are loads of stories about why it is important. Quick detour. My favorite one is, well, it's not favorite because it's not great, but when I was working in the PDD, we had a kid that came in. She was about 2.5 years old. Her parents brought her in via car, and she had been sledding and ran into a tree. This is in New England and Connecticut, so that's why there's all the snow on the ground, and people do dumb things and like let their kids go a million miles an hour into the forest. So she comes in and she's crying and nobody can get her to calm down, and she had some cuts on her face and cuts on her hands, and she's in her big puffy snowsuit. We got her hooked up to the monitors. Her blood pressure is low, and like even for a kid, low. She's kind of starting to fade in and out of it, and obviously everyone in the room is very worried. Now, she had been on the sledding hill. Her parents popped her in the car, took the 30-minute drive to the hospital because they thought it would be faster than an ambulance coming from kind of the middle of nowhere. Had come in through triage crying, probably spent about 5 or 6 minutes at triage, and then got into the resus room and was there for like almost 10 minutes before somebody finally cut her snow pants off and saw her femur sticking out of her leg, soaked in blood, draining blood, and her snow suit was so large and absorbent that it was absorbing most of the blood, and the rest of it was kind of puddling into her shoes. So until somebody took off her shoes and cut off her snow pants, you didn't see this like very obvious, very debilitating injury. So expose your patients. You need to see their whole bodies, especially on a trauma survey. They could not be complaining of something, and you have no idea if that is because there's nothing there or if it's because they're in shock and don't know what's going on or they can't express themselves. Long story short, you don't know what's going on, so use your own eyes and your hands and everything to figure it out. Cool? Great. So, first thing we're going to talk about, we're going to run through a couple different kind of disability tools and things that we can use to address specific injuries, and then we'll get into some cases and try to apply some stuff. So, who's seen this before? Yeah, come on. I know you guys have like all seen it, at least on a TV show, if not in real life. So, what do we use this for? Stabilize the spine. Thank you very much. So, there's a couple things that this does. The most important is that it does stabilize your C-spine. Obviously, if you fracture your C-spine and end up with a spinal injury there, you're pretty not good. It's bad. And a lot of that has to do with, like, think about all of your nerves that run through there that then innervate your diaphragm, and you can't breathe, you could become quadriplegic, etc. So, when do we use this? What are some indications for putting this guy on? Like what? Yeah, so high speed, high energy impact. So that is a fall from height, a fall from like a car crash, anything that has a lot of energy going into it, that's one. Anything else? Okay. Huh? Paralysis. Okay, we're trying to prevent paralysis with this, right?
You're not wrong in that the better phrasing for this neurologic deficit doesn't have to be paralysis.
Yeah. So any kind of neurological deficit is one, and there's kind of two others. Give you a hint. Where are we using this? Yep, so that falls under our high energy impact thing, but that's a good guess, because that is commonly where you see them. And where does this go on somebody's body? Neck, right? And that supports your head. So what are we worried about? When might we use this if what is injured? Yeah, any kind of blunt head or neck injury that's that you are concerned about the fact that they might have hit their head on the ground, and then you don't know if, especially like the little old ladies that love to get spinal fractures and compression fractures, like it could be pretty innocuous and be a fall from just standing. But if they have a head injury, you want to keep this in mind, okay? And then the last one is if they have any kind of midline tenderness over their spine. All right? So we pop this on. And we will show you guys how to pop these on later this week. And then you'll notice it says the next part is that you're securing it to the stretcher. So what do we mean by that? We mean you are it depends on what equipment you have, but basic story is that you want to make sure that while this is doing its job, it's not going to do the whole thing. It is just a piece of plastic, and if you really like roll off the bed or something, your head will move a bit. So we want to make sure that they are secured down to the stretcher, and normally put blocks on either side of their head, even if they have the collar on, to make sure they're not accidentally turning their head either way. Okay? And the last thing is, when do we take this off? After imaging. Most of the time, that is 100% the right answer. You have to make sure that you have completely cleared the injury that you are worried about. So just like last week when we were talking about putting on tourniquets in the practical sessions, and I was saying, the one thing you want to make sure you do is you're not taking that tourniquet off until you have a plan with what to do with the wound it was stopping, right? You're not just going to put it on and be like, oh, it's been 4 hours, let's pop that off, and then they're spurting blood everywhere again. So same thing with the C-spine. We are putting a cervical collar on to protect our C-spine, so we're not going to take it off unless we're sure that the C-spine is intact and not at risk of being injured. How do we do that? Imaging is one. What kind of imaging are we using? Okay, fair. That's a get out of jail free card answer though. What kind of imaging is there? What would we use? You want a CT scan? Okay, that's an option. I'll give you a hint. What's your spine made out of? What do we use to look for bone? X-ray. So one of the first modalities you're going to use when you come into the ED is going to be an X-ray, mostly because it is fast and easy, and you can get a portable X-ray to the bedside as you're doing the rest of your exam. When you do that, you're going to take a couple different views. You can Google what those different views look like, but there's a couple you want to take. The first one's going to be a lateral one from the side, so that you can see the lines of the neck and of all the bones there. Another one you're going to do is like one straight on, so you can see the bones. And that will include one that has with the jaw open, so that the teeth are not obstructing your view of the dens where the atlas and axis meet. Okay? So you want to be able to see all of that, so you're getting a full picture of both the lateral and front spine. That was kind of technical. Everybody with me? Yeah? Great. Yep, you can. Yep, so you're not taking this off until you're sure there's no injury. So you're not going to take it off to get the imaging to clear them. Yeah? Okay. Somebody else have a question? So yeah, it's plastic. There's no metal in it, so an X-ray will just pop right through. Okay, so if you don't have imaging available, there's a very specific set of criteria that we use that lets us be like, okay, I know I haven't gotten pictures, but I don't think I need any because they don't fit any of these criteria. So this is called the nexus criteria. And this is how you clear C-spine patients that you're like 99% sure that they don't have a C-spine injury and it's okay to take it off. If they have any of these 5 things listed, then they are not allowed to be cleared clinically, and you absolutely have to get imaging before you take that off, okay? Because sometimes people will put these on in the field because they're being precautionary and they're maybe being a little more cautious than they need to, which 10 out of 10 would always rather that than someone going the other way. But you need to be able to kind of use your judgment and be like, well, listen, this person has no focal neurological deficits. What's an example of something like that? Yeah, sure. So it's anything that's like one body system, right? So like hemiplegia, if you get like loss of vision, loss of like hearing, anything like that, that would indicate one single part of the brain is affected. So if you're getting like numbness and tingling just in like one hand or one arm, that would be an example. So that's one thing. If you have any midline spinal tenderness, so we're not talking about the muscles that are on either side of the neck, because if you feel the back of your neck, you can feel that there's muscles, or you should be able to feel, that there's muscles running along either side of your spine. People get injured all the time there, and they'll get strains and sprains in those muscles when they get like whiplash, for example, in a car accident. But that doesn't indicate that there's a spinal injury. Yeah? Makes sense? Bone, muscles, cool. So we're talking about you're running your fingers down that midline spine on their C-spine, and you hit every single vertebrae there, and they're like wincing in pain. Bad. That means they probably have an injury there, okay? And you need to clear it with a picture. Distracting injury. If their femur is broken, do you think they're really worried about the sore ache in their neck as opposed to the huge fucking bone that's broken in their leg? No, right? They're not going to be able to give you an accurate picture of their soreness there, so you can't clear them. Same thing goes for intoxication, because people that are drunk, think about it. I know most people have been out and about, and if people are intoxicated, they tend not to feel anything, or at least not to the degree that they should be, and won't be able to give you an accurate picture again. So there's a little mnemonic. The way that I remember it is like if you use the mnemonic spine. So S would be like spinal tenderness. That's your midline tenderness. P is painful, distracting injury. So if they're in a lot of pain, they're not going to tell you about their pain. I is intoxication. S-P-I. N is neurological changes or neurological deficits. And E is encephalopathy or like an altered mental status. Okay? So I can write that down for you guys somewhere, or you can just Google it. I'm sure it'll come up somewhere. Okay, everybody good with C-spine? Questions about that? Dope. Okay. Glucose. Everybody, I feel like, learns about this in the first like month of school, so I'm sure everybody's more than familiar with it. Most of the time, what we're going to use this little guy for, or something that looks very similar, this is a glucometer, and we're making sure that people are not either hyper or hypoglycemic, right? So people that come in that are super hypoglycemic can come in passed out, kind of like nauseous, really out of it. People that are hyperglycemic can come in kind of out of it, nauseous. So either way, you can get like this altered mental status. And hypoglycemia, especially in somebody that's super dehydrated, vomiting, diarrhea, they're not retaining any of those carbohydrates that you should be, and they can be very hypoglycemic, and it can lead to an extreme drop in their like mental awareness. And then on the flip side, if you have a kid that's like in, or an adult, that's in DKA, and they've now got cerebral edema, that's a huge red flag, right? Altered mental status. You need to address that right away. And so changes in glucose are a huge part of one of the things that you're looking for when you go through your ABCs and are looking for disability stuff. Yeah? Shoot.
What's DKA?
Oh, sorry. Diabetic ketoacidosis. So it's basically when somebody that is diabetic has their insulin isn't working, right? So either because they don't have enough or it's not connecting with their receptors. So you have so much sugar in your blood system that your body like basically freaks out and shuts down. Okay, that's the easy version. I'm sure there's a nicer version of that on Amboss somewhere. Okay, so this is our normal values. The 4.4 to 6.7, that's what they use here in Ireland, yes, right? 4.4 to 6.5, so that's the one that you need to know for here in Ireland. In North America, we normally use the 80 to 120 because we use mgs per deciliter. It's just a change in units. The most glucometers will tell you if it's very high or very low, which is what we're worried about here. If it's a little high or a little low, but within the normal range, when you're doing an initial survey, like what we're going to ask you to do in SimWars, it's fine. You're really just worried about the highs and the lows, and most glucometers, if you're lucky, will tell you. However, in SimWars, you will not have an actual glucometer that's going to tell you all the answers. So this is a number that you should know, not only for SimWars, but for the wards and for clinic and for every single diabetic consultant will love if you know this off the top of your head. So it's good to know, because in SimWars, we're just going to read you out or hand you a slip of paper that has some lab values with no reference ranges on it. So fun, good times. All right, what do we do if somebody is hypoglycemic? Yeah, right? They don't have enough sugar. We want to give them sugar. If you have a patient that is like alert, knows where they are, they're alert and oriented, they're talking to you, and they're just like real kind of almost like out of it, they're real tired, how do we give them sugar? Yeah, honestly, simple. Keep it simple. Don't overstress it. If you're trying to get sugar into somebody fast, gummy candies or like Jolly Ranchers or anything that has like pure sugar, aka like fruit juice, that's, if you can get that into them orally, do that, because that's going to be easier for the body. You can also, if you don't have those on hand, there are like glucose tablets that you can have that are basically pure sugar, except they taste like crap. So if you can't, do the orange juice there. So you're going to give them like roughly 15 to 20 grams of glucose off the bat, and kind of monitor and see how they do from there. So that's in our like nice, fine, talky patient. In our patient that is super out of it and is kind of unstable and we're worried about them, how are we going to give them glucose? Yeah, so IV, whichever the amount and the solution that you use is going to depend a lot on the situation, but you can use, anything that's dextrose. So you'll hear that abbreviated as like D whatever, and that would be your concentration. So like D5 is D5%, D10 is D10%, or the other one you'll hear is D50W, which means instead of it being 5% dextrose in like a normal saline solution, it's going to be 50 in water. That's what the W stands for. Cool? Just in case you hear those abbreviations, I feel like that's something that people don't tell you and they just expect you to know. So I always try to spell those out. Oops. Okay, questions on glucose?
What did you say the typical dose for oral glucose was?
According to Up to Date, it's 15 to 20 grams, but always with the factor that with both IV or oral, you're constantly reassessing. So like 15 minutes later, you're going to recheck a glucose, reassess your patient, and then act accordingly. Okay? Dope. Right. So this, oh, sorry, we don't need that. Okay, so this is an evaluation scale. It's one of the two we're going to talk about. This is a really quick introduction. It's kind of an introductory, that's not a word. It's an introduction tool. And it basically, this is a really fast, easy way for you to both identify where your patient is at and also really quickly communicate that to everybody as soon as you walk in the room. So if you walk in and somebody's like, this patient is only responding to pain, you're like, well, shoot, that's like way down at the bottom. That means that they're like only one step above unresponsive. Don't like that. So you're gonna react a lot quicker to a patient that is in that status versus you're a patient that is alert and oriented and talking to you and is able to give you like answers back and has a bit more awareness, because then they're not, Jesus, sorry, hold on. So then you're going to be more worried about a patient that's at the lower end than the top of the AppView scale. Pretty straightforward. Does everybody understand what I mean when I say the patient is only responding to verbal cues or the patient is only responding to pain? Yes.
What's the difference between alert and verbal?
So alert means that if I say, do you know what your name is? And you say, yeah, and I say, great, do you know where you are? Yeah, sure, right? So you're showing me that you are aware of what's going on. You know enough to, I give up. You know enough to know that they're, like where you are, what's going on, and you're kind of aware of your surroundings and the people in your scenario.
That's alert. Right?
That's alert. People that are only responding to verbal cues, that means that I'm like, hey, like, what's your name, whatever, you're like groaning back at me. But if I say, hey, I need you to raise your right hand to touch your nose, you can do that. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel
Alert
like-
is normal.
Yeah.
Alert is when you talk to somebody that's just like they're fine. Voice is like you have to yell over the phone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Question, go.
When is a good time to check for glucose? Like in the beginning or like?
Great question. So, as soon as you can. If you have somebody that's free and you have a patient that's out of it, it takes maybe 2 minutes total to set up the whole thing, prick their hand, and get your reading. And it's something that can give you, sorry, not 2 minutes, like literally 30 seconds to a minute. And that's something that can really give you an idea of where you're going with this patient or what might be wrong with this patient. Really quick, really easy, vital information, do it early, okay? A lot of times, like in SimWars specifically, it's something that you could tack on to, say, your like circulation person or your assessment person, because in the beginning, they're the ones that are going to be focused on your like circulation, bloods, and your disability.
So you could like do it like in the beginning. That's like part of the assessment. It doesn't have to like wait until you're done with circulation.
Yeah, and you'll kind of get a feel for it as we go. Okay.
With the massive campaign, what does blood have?
Does the blood? So no. Short answer is no. But if you're in a recess room, you should have access to dextrose and like several different. You should basically, most recess rooms have access to like Hartmann's, normal saline, half saline, and at least 1 or 2 dextrose concentrations that are, and probably lactated ringers as well if they don't have Hartmann's. And that should, like, I would say you're pretty much guaranteed to have access to those. Cool?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Who has heard of your GCS score? Come on, they love to say it on like every single medical show. Grey's Anatomy uses it terribly wrong like every single episode. So this is your GCS, Glasgow Coma Scale. And so while our AVPU was a way to kind of get like a really quick snapshot in the moment and give like an introduction to what's going on with the patient, your GCS is way more of a trending tool. This is going to give you kind of a status on where the patient is, but it's most helpful over time because you can see like, okay, they came in and they were here. We did these 5 interventions and now they're better. That kind of gives you an indication without any other excess like imaging or feedback that you're on the right track with your patient, okay? So how do we do this? As you can see on here, there's several different scores. So eyes is out of 4. So if they can, so if they are moving their, why can't I talk? Sorry. Okay. We're going to start, so if they are only moving their eyes in response to voice, then that means it's a 3. If it's only to pain, that means it's a 2. If it's unresponsive, that means it's a 1. You'll notice the last category of every single section is a 1. That means the lowest possible GCS you could have is a 3, because 1 plus 1 is 3. 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. Apologies, it's been a long day. So you can only have, the lowest GCS is a GCS of 3, and that is not good. That person is essentially brain dead. Not officially brain dead until you do more testing and prove it, but brain dead. Person, and then if you add up the top scores, so 4 plus 5 plus 6, that would be a 15. Okay, so normal is 15, bottom is 3. So we are looking for stages within that. Motor, so if they can obey commands, I'm like, great, lift up your hand, touch your nose, and you do that right away, 6, easy. If you're localizing pain, that means that you are reacting to pain, basically. So it doesn't mean that I'm being like sitting here and I'm telling you that, oh, it's my leg that hurts and that's the area that my leg hurts. This means that if I'm like pinching, pushing down on your nail bed to get a response, your body is reacting by pulling your hand away. Or if you're pinching their trap, then they're shrugging and trying to move their body. That means that they're still aware that their body is in pain and they're trying to reduce the pain in their body, which is a good sign, right? That's what normal people do. The next 2, you can see are withdraws from pain. And then, so that means that's when you're like pulling away. Sorry, didn't mean to get those 2 mixed up. So localizes pain is when you can tell that they know where their pain is. And a 4 is they're maybe not reacting to the pain, but they're pulling their body away from you regardless. Okay, and then decoordinate posturing and decerebrate posturing. Fancy names for that is like extending or flexing away from the pain. If you look at, I promise this is the most technical I will get with neuro because I hate neuro and can't go any further. But if you look at where the origins for your flexors and your extenders are within your brainstem, you can see that your extensors are at a higher level than your flexors. So as you're getting worse, your functioning is moving down away from your frontal cortex and down your brainstem. The further down your brainstem you get, the worse off the patient is. So if their extensors are working, they're here. If their flexors are working, they're here. If they're not responsive, they're at the bottom. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? I'm not even going to pretend like I know exactly where in the midbrain and pons that is, but it's somewhere in there, and that's how that works. Great. Questions on GCS? Shoot.
What are your values where you're like worried about the patient?
Anything less than 15.
So anything under 15 you're very worried?
Basically, yes. There are little things that you can use. Like one of the common ones you'll hear is like GCS less than 8 intubate. That is not a steadfast rule. It's way more dependent on their airway status and how you feel is about the patient overall. But that does also kind of serve as a reminder, like, oh, if they're all the way down to 8, like, that's bad. Because that means they're no longer protecting their airway, most likely. Is that fair? Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
I'm guessing it's important to be specific with this. So how do I know how do I communicate that they're deficient in one part? So how do I, if I give a score, if let's say it's only verbal, they're on a 2, but on the other two criteria, they're a 6 and a 4, they're full. How do I say, okay, they're at well, that makes them, good God.
Right, math.
Instead of them being 15, it would make them what, a 12? So, or an 11. So how do I say it's an 11, which is bad, but actually it's just in this one area that they're a bit mixed?
So, short answer is it doesn't matter. Because you're mostly using this as a tool to tell you whether or not this patient is neurologically intact, or if there's a decrease in their neurological functioning, and that could be a primary cause or a reaction to everything else that's going on in their body. So because you're using it for that purpose, it really doesn't matter which one is lagging, with the caveat that also I can only say from my understanding of what I've seen, most of these will kind of go down together. You're not going to get like a huge drop in one unless there's like a focal neurological thing going on, in which case you will see other signs of that. Any amendments?
Yeah, well, you'll see it written sometimes, GCS 13, parentheses, E, X, V, X, M, X. So eyes, verbal, motor. So when you see it written, when it's written down, you see it like that. In reality, if I have a specific reason that I need to express that someone's like, eyes are bad, but everything else is fine, I'll be like, GCS is 11, all eyes. Like, it's because it's just dropped down from there. But there's no formal way of doing it.
And I was just going to add that, just like Liz just explained, that is how like the anesthesiology department at Beaumont does a notation for it. Because like when you're in the ICU setting, you can have a change of status with the same number, so they like to be more specific. I don't know if in our scenarios it did matter or not, but
Long story short, for SimWars, you're fine. Just know that less than 15 is bad. Did you have a question? Great. Moving on. How many people have heard Perla or Perle? Yeah? Yeah? Somewhat familiar? Great. So it's a nice little mnemonic acrostic here. So pupils. Your pupils can tell you a lot if you know this, and you can know these causes. This will help you a lot when you get to, SE1 in several cases, and also if you're taking STEP, this kind of stuff comes up on step 1. You're basically on your assessment, you are looking for if your pupils are equal, so you don't have one that's hugely blown and one that's teeny tiny, because that would indicate that you're, good, which cranial nerve is that? No, I'm kidding, I would never fucking ask you that. Right, but that does mean that you have a nerve injury on one side and not on the other, and it's coming from somewhere in your midbrain at least, which is bad. So equal is bad. If they're not equal, bad. If they're not round, meaning that you could have like, an iris tear. I can't think of other examples off the top of my head at the moment. If they're not round, bad. If they're not reacting to light and accommodation, that means that cranial nerves 2 and 3 are not working, either one or the other, depending on the exact reaction, which again, bad. All of this, your pupils are literally a little gateway into your brain functioning, so you should treat them as such when you're analyzing them. Drug problems that cause pupil changes, or other bad brain things, right? Does everybody know that like mnemonic vitamins? It's like, what is it? It's vascular, like infection, toxic, something, 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 Google it. But that's a really good one to kind of know, and it applies a lot here. It's basically a nice little guideline for you if you're trying to think of differentials or what could possibly be wrong with a patient. It kind of helps you go through like, okay, could there be a vascular cause, like a brain bleed? Could there be an infection, meningitis? Could there be toxicity, any one of those drugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Cool? Great. This is the main chunk of what we want to focus on. Everything else is just as important, but this is a lot, and this stuff will come up a lot. This is a rapid trauma assessment. It's basically a way of going head to toe and making sure that you are checking every part of the body and you're not missing a major life-threatening injury. Each of these things stands for something. So deformities, contusions, abrasions, penetrations, burns, tenderness, lacerations, swelling. DCAP, BTLS, you will hear us refer to it as DCAP, BTLS quite often, so get to know this real well. And basically what you do is you're not just looking at your patient from across the room and being like, great, I don't see any burns, moving on, they don't have it. You are going to go through your patient from head to toe, and we have a nice little chart here to give you an example. And you are at each part looking for DCAP BTLS. So we are looking around the head, we're looking behind the ears, in the mouth, for all of said things, okay? It's pretty straightforward. Great. When do we do a rapid trauma assessment? Yeah. Unconscious patient, high mechanism of injury, those are two. Anybody else? When would we want to do a rapid trauma assessment? Huh? Yes, if there's obvious trauma. If you see a pole sticking out of them from across the room, like, that's probably a good time to do this. Which I've actually seen a nice guy roll into the ED with a fence post in him one time, so. Abdomen, right there. So, yeah, long story short, don't smoke and sit on shed roofs that have wrought iron fences beneath them. It's a bad plan. And then the other thing is, if you have any reason to suspect some kind of multi-system trauma, even if they don't have something external, you're going to do the full rapid trauma assessment. Make sure that you're catching all those signs of lack of like end organ perfusion, huge bleeds, hypovolemia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Questions on this? Great.
Question on the pupil, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Them being unequal, isn't it like 1 in 5 people has 1 in 5, anybody just 20% chance of you having unequal like people? Anisocoria, is it called?
It is called anisocoria.
It is in Anisocoria. It's a good question. Short answer is it's going to be really obvious.
Yeah.
If it's to the point that you're worried about it and you want to do something about it and address it, like, it's not going to be the slight little change that you see in Anisocoria. It's going to be like fucking obvious. Okay? Yeah?
Good enough, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Great. Cool. And this is basically just so you make sure you're finding all the injuries that need to be addressed. It's a nice systemic way to go through it. And we'll go over secondary surveys, including this shortly, like within SimWars. Great. So I know that we all learn nice history-taking skills, and we run through their family history and their social history, and we do not give a shit when it comes to a trauma assessment. That's the basic answer. Like, I want to know the basic minimal information that I need to treat this person to stop them from dying in front of me. So I don't really care if you live with your dog and you have carpets in your apartment and that means that you're asthmatic. Like, I don't care. So this is what you want. I want to know what they've been complaining of and what I can see and pick up on an exam. Okay? So that's your signs and symptoms. I want to know what is happening to this patient right now and what has led to that point. So, do they have any allergies? I'm going to be pumping meds into them. I'm going to be giving them oxygen. I'm going to be giving them maybe contrast to go through a CT. I want to know if they have allergies to any of that so that don't make this patient worse, right? Whole goal of the ED is to not make the patient worse and don't let them die. Cool? Medications, again, you want to know what they're on so that you're not, cutting into somebody or sending somebody up for surgery that is like 5 times anticoagulated and on warfarin and their INR is like 3, right? That'd be not great. So, past medical history, again, if they look like they're having a stroke and they've had like 4 strokes before and that means that they're on X, Y, and Z and they've had these procedures done, you would like to know that before you give them treatment, right? Cool. Last oral intake, again, if you're going to be doing any kind of procedures on them, that's one of the first things the surgeons will ask you or anesthetics will ask you because we don't want to give people aspirational pneumonia. It's not fun, and you'll be in the ICU for like 3 weeks, and it's not a good plan. And then the events leading up. So I want to know, okay, this guy has like a femur, everything, and he's in a ton of pain, he's got a bleed on his head, and like he's screaming in pain, and I've gotten all this other information. Now I want to know the story. Like, what happened right leading up to this? Was he drinking, and that's why he's in a car accident? Was he just minding his own business, walking across the street, and then a freaking car came and took him out? You want to know the exact mechanism of injury, because that's going to change how worried you are and what your differential is. Cool? Question?
So what would be like an example of a last oral intake that like would raise your red flag?
It's not so much about like what exactly they ate unless it's relevant to the actual situation. Like I ate something that I'm allergic to. The question is, what did you eat? How much did you eat? When, basically. So like, how do you go in it? How much garbage is going to be coming back out at me?
Yeah, basically that. So for anybody online that didn't hear, Blaze just basically said that it's not so much about what you had for your last oral intake. It's more about how much you had because you want to know what's going to happen if you try to intubate this patient. Great. Okay, so we've gotten our basic information. A lot of times you will not be getting this information from the actual patient. If they are unconscious, this will be more of a collateral history. And then the next step is our OPQRST. As you can see, we really like the alphabet. We talk about our ABCs. This is just another example. And so this is going to be more of, it's another type of history. It's kind of the rest of those details that we said we didn't care about initially that are going to give you a bit more information once you have the situation under control. So these are a lot of your like Socrates things, right? So onset, provocation, quality, so that's like your character. If it's traveling anywhere, how bad it is, if it's gotten better or worse, and your time. Like, pretty straightforward. Everybody good?
Better Socrates.
Yeah, it's just Socrates, just in a different order.
It
Cool.
makes it fun for the people that are evaluating you and like Oskies to try to follow your Socrates and you bounce around like this.
Okay, questions? I know I threw a lot at you. We're going to run through some cases real quick.
Which history method should I use?
For SimWars,
Generally.
we don't care. If you are getting this information and you are going through in an organized way that makes sense to your brain and you're getting the information, like, I don't care.
Like 2 hours.
Yes, quickly.
Here's the thing. Sample and OPQRST are pre-hospital tools used to guide a basic medical history, and OPQRST to guide examination about pain specifically. So sample is to help you basically with your HXPI, and OPQRST is better Socrates, right? That's all those are. So which history should you be doing? You should be doing both of those. I don't want you to do a long case history. It's crazy, right? So do those.
Also, for those who don't know what we're talking about when we say Socrates, it is something that
Don't
Oh.
fucking worry about it. OPQRST.
it's something that ORCSI will teach you when
when you come to taking histories and each letter stands for something, you can just use this one. It's the same thing. Okay, I just realized there's like FY.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah,
We'll learn
sorry.
it eventually, but like, it's
Okay, great. Questions? Great. Okay. Oh, this is a fun one. Is there any role for a full peripheral neuro exam or cranial nerve exam in emergency department
These
or
are questions
recess?
that people sent us during the lectures in years past.
Yeah. I just hate neuro, so this one's particularly entertaining to me. So this is the answer. In the ED, yeah, definitely. You're gonna get consults, either you're going to be doing it yourself, unlikely, or you're gonna get neuro to come consult and do the full assessment. However, in the first 10 minutes of a recess scenario, which is basically what we're replicating within SimWars, highly unlikely that you have time. There's going to likely be way more things that are going to be a higher priority that need to be dealt with in those first 10 minutes that you're not going to get to this. But that's not to say that it never happens in the ED. Okay?
You can also do like parts of it, like just
Yeah.
see the big problems. Like you can just be like, can you squeeze my hand? Can you feel your legs? And then move on.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So for everybody online, Adara just said that you can literally just take little pieces that are relevant to your case. Like, can you feel your legs, or can you like squeeze my hands, and then move on and just use that as a baseline. Great. Okay, some cases. Let's get into the fun part. Cool. So, case number 1. So we have a nice picture of a helicopter and an ambulance. Just in case you guys don't know what those look like at this point. So, case number 1. Jane Doe, she's a 20-year-old female. So she's coming in, she's getting brought in to the ED by the paramedics. She has been pulled out of the ocean by RNLI and was immersed for an unknown amount of time. For those of you like me that didn't know what RNLI stands for, it's basically the equivalent of the Coast Guard. It stands for Royal National Lifeboat Institute. But they do the whole water ambulance things. Cool? So, they plucked this woman out of the ocean. Nobody has any idea how long she was in the water for. And she just popped into your ED. Where are we starting with her? Thank you. Yes, start with your freaking ABCs every time. This is not a trick question. We will ask you every week, and by week 7, if you do not have the right answer, yeah, I probably will. Or I'll make you sit in like the corner of shame or something. Okay, so where do we start? We always start with our ABCs. Airway, yes. So airway. So this woman is unconscious. So she can't talk to you to tell you that she has a patent airway. She's apneic, which means what? Yeah, she's not breathing. So B is breathing, right? So again, she's apneic. And C is, so this is her pulse. It's 34 beats per minute and steady. Are we happy about that? No. Great, good, we are learning. Her skin is pale, cold, and dry. Happy with that? Great. What does this sound vaguely familiar to? Yes, literally the case that we did last week with hypovolemia, right? And we talked about how like it can either be your pump or the pipes, and it's got to be one of those. So this case, and CPR is in progress. So, we're going to cover BLS, ACLS next week. But for the meantime, just a little nugget, because this is something I got asked a couple times last year, was that this woman has heartbeat. She has heartbeat. I can feel a pulse. It's thready, but she has a heartbeat. So why are they doing CPR? I thought CPR was for only rest. Huh?
34.
Yeah. Her heart rate is 34. That is low, right? What's a normal heart rate? Yeah, roughly 60 to 100. Long story short, a lot higher than what's going on here. So when we talked about circulation, we talked about our heart needing to be able to pump stuff around our body. Is this fast enough to get the oxygen around our body? to our organs? No. This is going to lead to end organ damage from lack of oxygen and death. Cool.
Also just be lying in the bottom of the lake for a while. Kind of contributes to that decision a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yes. Also, she is not in good shape. And you do a lot of compressions on people that are hypothermic, okay? Because I know it's a cheesy phrase, but like you're not dead till you're warm and dead. It's pretty true. So if their heart rate is really slow because their whole metabolism is slowed way down because they're super hypothermic and they're half like in hibernation, then you want to do CPR until they can for themselves. Not do CPR on themselves until they can beat their heart for themselves. Cool. All right. Here's our vital signs. We've talked about her heart rate. Respiratory rate is 10 breaths per minute, and she's currently being ventilated. Her blood pressure is 60/30. Good or bad? Bad, yes. Oxygen is 63%. Bad. And look at her temperature. Happy with that? No. What do we want it to be above? Ah, that was a lot of numbers. Okay, so what's a normal temperature? Okay, what's a normal temperature in Celsius? 37, baseline. I don't know. It could have been my brain. Or 98.6 for those of you that are American and we just like to be controversial. So, very low, right? Anything that's kind of, I know like all the nurses that I used to work with used to say like anything under 35, I'm starting to get a little worried and I want to know what's going on. So this is a hell of a lot lower than 35, probably due to the fact that she's been in an ocean for the next thing. So, what are we doing next? Okay, fair. All right, we've addressed her ABCs. We've addressed her airway and breathing, at least. And, yeah, so we're talking about what this week? Great. So, true. We're going to circle back for 2 seconds. Circulation. We talked about her blood pressure is real low and people are doing CPR. What do we do for ACLS while we're doing CPR? Yes, we are giving them epinephrine. We're going to be giving them drugs, right? That's the normal formula in BLS, ACLS. Do not worry if you don't know this. We are going over it in detail next week. But one thing that you really should know is that if you give cardiac resus drugs to a patient that is hypovolemic, their metabolism is so slow. What did I just say? Hypothermic patient, their metabolism is so slow that those drugs are just going to go sit in their system and not really interact with their drugs or with their cells the way you want the drugs to interact with their cells. So what happens when we've been giving them, 4 rounds of epi and then all of a sudden we get their metabolism up enough that they can process? Yes, basically all the drugs would hit them nearly in succession, which is good or not good, is bad. So just something to keep an eye on. Just because you're giving a ton of drugs in resus to a patient that is hypothermic doesn't mean that they're actually working or not working on their body. They're probably just like not affecting them at all. Okay? So first thing we're going to do is an ECG. Anybody that's in cardiac arrest, we want to know what's going on with their heart. Especially since she has a heart rhythm, we want to make sure that it's regular. Cool. Then we're getting IV access. What are we giving via IV? Fluids. Great. What about the fluids specifically? I'll give you a hint. Her temperature is 27 degrees. That is so freaking cold. Okay? That is ice. So we want to warm her up. So one of the ways we can do that is we can give her fluids. So our whole goal here is to warm her back up. There is a literal fluid warmer that hospitals have that warms fluids as you run it into their body. What are some other things we could do for warming? Okay, great. Blankets out of the blanket warmer.
I don't know what it's called here, but like a bear hugger.
It's called a bear hugger. Very good. Yeah. So we're going to give them a bear hugger. I know some of you guys might have seen that the first week. It's a huge blanket thing. And it's got little areas in it that you can pump hot air into it, and it loops around the patient. You'll see them a lot used in any kind of longer surgeries. So orthopedics, general surgery, vascular. You'll see them under the blankets and under the sterile drape if you watch a patient being prepped for surgery, because ORs can be very cold and you want to keep that patient nice and warm. Okay. Anything else? What happens? Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
If her skin's feeling cold, how do you know she's not like bleeding and she's like the patient is just cold?
Are you talking about like, how do we know she's not just...
Right? Like she might be losing blood.
Sure. So what are the tools we use to figure that out?
Just like do the whole body stuff. So then you just like skip, like
You do the thing. You do the thing. She comes in with a temperature of 27. You're gonna want to warm her up, but she's also fallen into the water somehow. You don't know how that happened. So she's getting a rapid trauma assessment anyway. She's getting a fast scan anyway, right?
But also, if someone is bleeding internally, that blood will still be warm, even if it's in the wrong place. So the core temperature won't necessarily drop
Not that low, not
immediately.
much.
so you
Not
focus
that.
on the temperature of the blood.
You can do two things at once.
Yeah. I'm just talking about the temperature specifically right now because we're talking about disability exposure this week. But that doesn't mean that you don't still do all those other things that you would do for your airway, and you assess them and you try to figure out what's going on in the whole picture. Okay? Great. So we've put a bear hugger on them. They've got warm blankets. We're pumping fluid in through their IVs. Where else can we put warm fluid? Everywhere. No, so you can pretty much put it, there's ways that you can do it. It's definitely a last resort and not something that you're going to be making the call on in the real world for a very long time. But one of the things you can eventually get to is you can do warm, warm fluid lavages. So for your abdomen, that would mean that you would stick a drain in this side and a drain in this side, and you are pumping warm fluid in this side, and it's coming out this side. Okay, and you're basically warming their central cavity that way. Because what is a huge, large vessel that runs through your abdomen? Your aorta, right? That's going to have a lot of blood and it's going to go perfuse throughout your body. So if you can warm that, that's going to do well. You can also do you can do your thoracic cavity. Obviously you don't want to collapse your lungs completely because then no breaths. Breath trumps B trumps D, right, as you're coming down. Okay, I'm going to stop there because that's about as much as we need to know for this. Okay, are they in shock? How do we know if they're in shock? What? Okay, pulse is one part. What else? Oh, pupils. Fair. Certain types of shock, yeah. Anybody else?
Mental status.
All right, so she's unconscious. Yeah, okay, so like hypovolemic shock, possibly.
What's your cap refill gonna be?
Oh.
Fucking a million, infinity. There's no blood going to a periphery at all, because all our vessels are like, if we send blood there goes all the heat, right?
Mm-hmm. Great. So we want to check to make sure she's not in shock or in shock. And then are we giving cardiac drugs? Oh, I kind of preemptively did this. No. Yes. So basically...
That shock question, sorry, I think the
Yeah,
shock
that
question
was-
is do we defibrillate her with electricity?
Oh, I was like, I don't understand why this is in here.
Do we defibrillate her with electricity? Well, now the answer is okay. No, it does not. Nope, it does not depend on the rhythm at all. Patient at that level of core temperature does not get defibrillated.
Why?
Because what are you doing when you shock somebody? What is the electricity doing? Right. And that means that those muscle cells have to be working and firing. And if your muscles are really cold, and like if you're outside, right, and you get really cold, all your muscles get tense, and you're not, it's, the heart is a muscle. It's not going to work. You can send volts of electricity into there, and it's still not going to do anything except hurt them. Okay?
So I should at least get it back to a normal rate to determine whether it's a shockable or not shockable.
To normal temperature first.
Yeah, so we're, right now, her problem is that she's really cold, which means her metabolism is in the floor. It's bad. And that means no matter what you're throwing at her, she doesn't have the, like, none of her muscles or anything, nothing's able to generate ATP to get anything working. So her heart muscle not working. You give her drugs, nothing's gonna metabolize the drugs because again, they're not generating any ATP, they're not working properly from a physiological standpoint. So it doesn't matter what you throw at them until you get their metabolism up enough that then those interventions can work.
The arrhythmia is secondary to the low temperature.
Correct.
Yes.
It's not innate.
And we'll talk more about this next week.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's some
Nuances.
like exceptions to this rule,
Yeah.
but we'll talk more about that next week.
Go ahead.
I have a bit of a stupid question.
This is the space to ask all the dumb questions and then you'll look super smart in tutorials.
We gave her like the cardiac drugs in this case. What would happen if she gets conscious? Will she react to the drugs?
Yeah, so kind of what I said earlier, like, this is not an exact answer, but this is the rough sketch of what would happen. You're pumping drugs into her. All her drugs are not interacting with their cells, they're just in her body. And then if you suddenly pick up that circulation, so now they're circulating and they're being metabolized, they're all gonna be metabolized at once. So if you shoot somebody up with like 4 grams of epinephrine at once, is that gonna be good for their heart or bad for their heart? Right. So, and if your whole point is that you're trying to get her heart back on track, you don't want to flood her muscles and everything with a ton of adrenaline all at once. Yeah? Cool. Questions on that? Great. We already went through a bunch of these. Warm fluids, bear huggle, pleural or peritoneal lavage. Oh, warm humidified oxygen. Don't dry people's mucosa out even more when they're already dehydrated and cold. If you think about like if you come in and you're soaking wet from the rain and then the AC hits you and you're like, this is annoying and cold, right? You don't want to do that to your patients. So, and then the last resort would be you can put them on ECMO. Not super important to know for SimWars, but know that this is an option for real life. This requires like an ICU level of care, several specialists to look after them, and is definitely a last resort, because if you're at the point when you have to go on ECMO, your prognosis is pretty shit. Okay? Not to say that it doesn't work. It does work, and it's a great tool when we have to use it. But you don't want your patients to get there. Okay?
ECMO is like a machine that takes people's blood and just takes the blood from the body, warms it up, and pumps it back into the body, and it's basically like an outside or external heart. Oxygenates
Yes.
as well, yeah.
It-
So it works as
It's
as
literally
heart and lungs.
it's literally a mechanical thoracic cavity.
Like dialysis, but for warming cells.
Not dialysis.
Not quite.
No. So you're literally connecting it to the central, you're connecting it to your central like veins and central arteries, and you are physically taking the blood out of your body, running it through this machine and going right back into direct central circulation so that it perfuses your brain and your heart and warms everything appropriately.
If dialysis is an external kidney, ECMO is an external heart and lungs.
Do the heart and lungs still work while you're doing this, like partially working, or?
Depends
Yes.
on the situation.
It,
And
that's
a question for an ICU consultant.
I was going to say that's a very nuanced
We're now way
question.
beyond the scope of what you guys need to know today.
Okay, moving on. Case 2. This one's a little bit more straightforward. So, 19-year-old guy comes in straight from the rugby pitch. He experienced a head-on-head collision, was tackled to the ground about 30 minutes ago, and then had sudden shortness of breath and mid-sternal chest pain. Totally healthy guy otherwise. He does have asthma, which he has an inhaler for, and he can use it as needed, but hasn't needed it anytime recently. No known drug allergies. What are we worried about? Okay, possibly, yeah, because we've got a head injury. So where do we start? Airway, there we go. So this guy is alert and oriented. He's able to talk to you, so you know his airway's patent. He's tachypnic at 28. He's got pleuritic pain on the right side, which, what's pleuritic pain? Real quick, like one sentence.
Breathe in.
Yeah.
Breathe in.
So it's basically pain with deep breathing. His O2 sat is 90. He has no breath sounds at all on the right side. And he is super hyperresonant on exam. And there's no tracheal deviation. His heart rate's 120, no cyanosis, blood pressure is great. His GCS is a full 15. He has Pearl A, so everything looks good from a neuro status. His temperature is 36.8, which is great. Keep going. F. So his F is Foley and family, so Foley catheter. Doesn't have one in. He is not not neuro or vascularly compromised, so we don't really need one at the moment. His family is waiting outside. His glucose is 4.3. Is that within range? Just a teeny bit low. Yeah. Okay. So we've gone through basically what all of the weird and not weird things are. What is your next step going to be? What are we worried about out of all of these things? Right, breathing, right? See that B, it's got all that stuff. Absent breath sounds on one side, bad. That means your lung is not working at all on that side. So what do we want to do for this guy? We're worried about his lungs. How do we investigate lungs? I feel like...
I would do a chest x-ray.
Yes, so if we want to take a good look at the lungs, we do a chest x-ray. Ta-da, this is what it looks like. What are we worried about? Is this good or bad? Bad, right? In general, bad. That big black hole, good? No. What does that mean? There's no lung there. No, literally, like basic answers. There's no lung there. So that means that their lung has either, one, they never had a lung. We're going to assume that this guy is totally healthy and normal, and he was born with a lung. Or two, the lung has gone somewhere else. Most common reason is that it collapses, right? Everybody's heard of a collapsed lung before? Fancy medical term for that is drawback. We're just going to go with pneumothorax. So as you can see, hold on. Okay, so we've got this big black hole on this side. Does this side of the lungs look normal?
Yeah, I mean, the x-ray is overexposed, I think.
Okay, Carl. Okay, so you can see their spine here. We have we can see their trachea coming down. And then what's this big thing here? It's their heart, right? That should be in your chest. If you can't see a heart on the chest x-ray, that's a big problem. And then you can see other lung markings here that are very clearly not here. Is everybody good with seeing the fact that there is a lung on one side and no lung on the other? Great. So what do we do for a pneumothorax? How do we fix it?
Where are the bronchioles?
Huh?
Where are the bronchioles?
Oh, geez, Louise. Okay.
This is not a great quality.
This is a really bad x-ray, so I can't... All right, let's say this is their trachea.
Breathing not important for this. You gotta fix something else first.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm trying to point out here is that there is no lung here. How do we get the lung back? Huh? Yeah. We put it, so there's a couple different things you can do. One of the things you can do is to put a needle in. Mostly you're going to go in the 5th intercostal space in the mid-axillary line. And that is going to be kind of your base insertion site for both a needle decompression as well as a chest tube later on. Okay? All right, last case. We're going to burn through this one really fast because I talk a lot and need to get moving here so you guys can go to sleep. So I can go to sleep, really. Great, so last case. 35-year-old male who presents to the ED via ambulance after an electric shock injury. Okay, where are we starting? Great, so alert and oriented times 4, patent airway. Tachypnic at 24, heart rate's 120, no cyanosis, blood pressure's 90/40. GCS is 15, good or bad? Great, Pearl A, temperature's 36.8, doesn't have Foley, family's outside, glucose is 4.3. What are we worried about here? Yeah, so what about the blood pressure? Diastolic blood pressure is low, right? 90 on top is fine. It's could be low for some people, but let's assume that that's fine. So what are we going to do next?
Can you say that the heart rate is high?
Yes, we can. It is high. This is
Also, like, what are you worried about in this patient?
electric shock patient.
Right? He got electrocuted. That's what you're worried about.
I know I kind of skipped and switched to this one rather than talking here, but yeah, this guy just got shocked. So yeah, we're worried about if he got shocked by electricity. We're also worried about the electricity in his heart. What else happens for you to get when you get shocked? Okay, correction. How do you get shocked? Okay, which involves you doing what? Touching something, right? So if I touch something and it shocks me, what's going to happen? Huh? Yes, it could burn you. Remember that nice DCAT BTLS? What does the B stand for? So when you do a trauma assessment on this guy, one of the things you're going to be looking for big time is deformities and burns, okay? So we're still going to do all the normal things. We're going to get an EKG because we're worried about the current. He got shocked by an electric current. We want to check his electric current. We want to get IV access because, like you identified, his blood pressure is low. We want to make sure that we do fluid resus to get both his blood pressure back up and the reciprocal tachycardia back down. And we are going to do a full rapid trauma assessment, okay? You know how at the beginning when we talked about any kind of mechanism of injury indicates that you need a rapid trauma assessment? Do you think that a massive electric shock falls in that category? Yeah. So electric shock, we need to know burns, mostly because when we do our fluid resuscitation, we need to know exactly how much burns this person has had. Burned skin allows you to lose moisture and heat into the atmosphere way faster than your normal skin does, okay? Your skin is a great barrier to the outside world, keeps everything intact. So we need to do two things. We need to know how much of your body is covered in burns and how bad those burns are, because that's what's going to detail this. So as part of your rapid trauma assessment, you're looking for how bad those burns are. We use this system to estimate severity. There's basically 3 levels. So superficial, just your epidermis is affected. So that'd be like a sunburn. Partial thickness. So that is when your epidermis and dermis are affected. So that's when you get those like blisters. It's red. It's super painful. Like you see that with like hot liquid burns. If people spill like their hot coffee or something and it burns them, that's what you'll see is a partial thickness. And then full thickness burns is where you go epidermis, dermis, and some of the underlying tissue, whatever that means. So tendons, muscles, fat, whatever. This is when you get that like dark, leathery, dry, gross burn that they love to show on like TV and stuff, okay? This person needs a hospital ASAP. Common causes would be fire or electric burns or a very, very prolonged exposure to like a hot liquid. Basically that allows it to get through there. So that's how you do severity, how deep it is, okay? The other thing we need to do is estimate percent of body surface area. So there's two things. Rule of nines is where you basically, you can use this chart and look at it later. Basically each section of your body indicated is 9%, okay? So if you look at it just real quick, you notice your arms say like 4.5 on the front and 4.5 on the back. So arm, 9%, 9% for the whole thing, okay? Another thing you need to be careful of on the limbs is if you have a burn that goes all the way around, either your limbs or all the way around your chest, is that skin gonna move really well and stretch really well? No, not at all. That is leather. Leather doesn't stretch, right? Whereas like if you have nice cotton, that's gonna stretch and move a lot easier. So you're worried about two things. One, on your chest, burns coming down. What does our chest need to stretch with? Yes, with your lungs, with breathing, right? So if your skin is so scarred down and it's held together like that, or is it going to be easy or hard for you to expand your lungs? Which leads to breathing issues, bad. The other thing is if it's like around a circumferential, which means it goes all the way around the circumference of a limb, that means that it's going to not let that expand. And let's say we have a really bad bruise or an injury to that area, and everything's getting swollen and we're vasodilating, is that going to stretch with it or not? Not, right? And then we can end up with compartment syndrome, which is bad. Okay? Basic rules. Anything over 15% body surface area in adults or 10% in children, that's severe, okay? And they need like hospital, ICU, burn unit, whatever. They need a professional assessment ASAP. Two things and I'll come to you. Yeah, okay, last thing. The reason we need to do the body surface area is for this formula. Know this formula, memorize it because you will need it. Both for SimWars and for life. This is a good thing to know. It's called the Parkland formula. It's basically, so you do 4 mils times percent body surface area, which you just calculated using your rules of 9, and multiplied by their weight in kilograms. So you can kind of picture, you know, you get a rough estimate of about how much fluid they need. Then you're going to give the first, whatever the total of that fluid is that you just calculated, you're going to give the first half in the first 8 hours, and then the second half is going to go over the next 16 hours. So this is calculating how much you're giving over the first 24 hours that they're there. Everybody understand diagram? Yes? Great.
Also, if you don't like memorize this formula, it's fine as long as you know that it exists and you know that what it's called, so you can look it up if you need it.
Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, in real life, you can always look things up. Okay, / you'll have references on the walls and stuff. Okay, last thing. Oh, well, this is, Blaze put this in here a couple years ago. Yeah. Great. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good plan. All right, anybody have any last questions? Go ahead.
What kind of deformities could form in patients who are just electrically shocked?
When you get zapped by electricity, all your muscles tense up, and that can break bones. That easy.
Yeah, or dislocate joints. Those are the big ones. Shoulders, elbows, hips. Okay, I think that's everything. If you guys think of any questions, I never think of questions within tutorials or class or anything. I always think of them 3 days later. So feel free to shoot us any emails with any questions you have, and there's no stupid questions. Like, we are the people that you ask the stupid questions to, okay? Because then when you won't have them in class, and you'll look awesome. Cool, and thank you for dealing with me talking so much.
We love you. We love you talking. It's fun.
Do you want to just stop the recording?
No. So I want to say a couple important things before I repeat the things that I say every week for the people that haven't heard it yet. But important stuff for next week. So this Wednesday, like every Wednesday at 8 a.m., the bookings for next week will go live. However, they will look slightly different because, in case some of you haven't realized, which I didn't until a couple days ago, next Monday is Halloween. Yay! Which means it's a bank holiday, and we don't want to make you come in here for a lecture, as cool as our lectures are, on Halloween Day. So we're off next Monday. Okay? Instead, we're going to give the lecture on Tuesday because it's a lecture that we think is important to give in person, in particular. So also for the people online, if you can make it on Tuesday for the in-person lecture, if there's one lecture you're going to show up for, this is the best one. Because our lecture will be on Tuesday, we won't have a practical on Tuesday, okay? So instead, what we're going to do, because we still want to offer the same amount of practical time, is we'll have our normal practical on Thursday, and then on Saturday, we're going to have our normal practical from 10 to 11 to 1, like every week. But there will be an earlier slot from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m.
9 a.m., 9 to 11:30, and then 11:30 to 2.
Yeah.
That's just to totally cover any leftover time.
Basically, we're going to double the time that we're doing this on Saturday because we're losing the Tuesday to the lecture that is being moved. So when you go into the HQ on Wednesday to sign up, you will see this reflected on the events that are offered, okay, so it will be slightly different. So if you usually come on a Tuesday, or there won't be something on Tuesday, so you'll have to either get a slot for Thursday or come Saturday morning, okay? And that's just, it's the only way that we could make it work, so that's the way that it's gonna go. And that's like the most important thing that I had to say today. Also on Tuesday, if you're coming for the lecture, costumes are highly encouraged, and we can all go and have our own little Halloween party after, for whoever's interested in that. And then I just want to repeat really quickly things that I say all the time, but some people still aren't hearing, unfortunately. Number one, please, if you're sending any emails, send it to the simwars@orcsi.ie email and not the Emergency Society at ORCSI email. I'll repeat that. Please send them to the SimWars email and not the Emergency Society email, okay? The only person that has access to the Emergency Society email really is Blaze. I can see the emails, but I can't reply to you. I physically cannot. They won't let me. I don't have access. So please send them to the SimWars. Natalie has access to the SimWars. Jen has access to the SimWars. Everyone has access to the SimWars. We can get back to you almost immediately. If you send to the Emergency Society, you're lost. You're gone in the system. We will not see you, okay? That's the first one. Second, sign-ups are closed now. So if you have any friends that want to do this, sorry, they can't anymore, okay? Yeah, okay, perfect.
People who are still signing up though, like tonight, so.
What do you mean tonight?
Don't.
I closed the Google form.
People for the first day, they're signing up for practicals on HQ.
Okay, I will email them after.
Yeah, so if you've never been here before and you didn't sign up before this week, which was the last week for sign-ups, and you book for the practical, your booking will be cancelled, and we'll explain to you in a very kind email that unfortunately, because we have limited space and you've missed the first 3 weeks, we welcome seeing you next year, but you can't be here this year. You still have access to the website, you still can look at the lectures, we'll put resources up, but you just can't attend the practicals. The same goes if in the past few weeks you have booked for a practical and you haven't shown up, and we don't know why, or you haven't contacted us within 24 hours of it happening, so you not showing up. There was a couple of those this weekend. I know there was a bit of a change in venue. There was a couple of those this weekend. So a couple of, I don't think anyone here actually, but you might receive an email being sorry, your book is not valid because you didn't show up at your booking last week, okay? And we've kind of set these rules from the beginning, and we need to stick with them if we want to maintain any kind of sanity on our part.
The 24 hours, like when we say you need to contact us, when we say you need to contact us within 24 hours of the booking that you did not show up to, that means either the 24 hours directly prior, or before that preferably, or the 25 hours directly after. If you email us 4 days later, that is not helpful to us in any way, shape, or form. We originally were going to be like, you have to email us before, but we understand that, you know what, sometimes life happens and you get pulled away to something else, and we don't want to punish people for that, which is why we extended the window to 24 hours after, even though that doesn't give us the slot
Doesn't help.
back
Yeah.
to give to somebody else.
I just remembered, there's so many important things I have to say. So this weekend, the venue was changed for you that came on Saturday. That's just because there was no space in the other building. Next week, so not this week, but next week, so the Halloween week, on Thursday, we also won't be on the 3rd floor. We'll be in this building, just upstairs, so tutorial rooms 1, 2, and 3. We were there on the first week. If you were there on Tuesday, that doesn't matter. Just check the poster of the event that you're going to, and the right rooms will be there. I know usually we're on the 3rd floor, but Thursday of Halloween week we will not be. So if you're booking for that day, please make sure that you check where it is that you need to go. Okay. Any questions?